Welcome to our deep dive, you guys, into early childhood development.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah, we've got tons of material here that you've provided for us.
Yeah.
Excerpts from academic texts, research papers, even some practical advice, all about how babies and toddlers, go from those first reflexes to thinking and feeling little people.
Yeah, how they grow so much in such a short time.
So to break this down, we're going to be looking at it from 6 different approaches
Right.
to understanding how they learn and grow. And we're going to be looking at the behaviorist, psychometric, pygician, information processing, cognitive neuroscience, and social contextual perspectives.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's like having 6 different lenses to zoom in on those really crucial early years.
Right.
And what's so interesting is that each approach kind of offers unique insights and sometimes even challenges the other ones a little bit.
Right.
Like, we'll see how modern research is questioning some of Piaget's classic theories about infant development.
Oh, cool.
So there's like disagreements even among the experts.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like we'll even uncover some surprising findings along the way.
Oh, like what?
Like the fact that babies might start categorizing objects by shape and color as early as 3 months old.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's so young.
It really is. It really makes you realize just how much those little brains are working, like right from day one.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with the behaviorist approach.
Okay.
This approach focuses on how babies learn through conditioning.
So it's about how those early experiences shape their behavior.
Exactly. Like one of the sources mentioned baby Ella, who learned to blink at the sight of a camera.
Oh, yeah, like how does that happen?
It's a classic example of classical conditioning.
Oh,
So initially, the camera flash caused the blink,
right.
but eventually just the camera itself was enough to trigger that response.
Wow, so the baby learned to associate the camera with the flash.
Exactly. And it's like even seemingly simple behaviors can be explained by these learning mechanisms. Yeah, it's like their little brains are just constantly making associations between these different stimuli and responses.
Right.
Now, the behaviorist approach also emphasizes the role of reinforcement.
Reinforcement.
Yeah, basically how consequences can shape behavior.
Okay, I see.
So, like, think about a baby who learns that babbling gets them attention from their parents.
Oh, yeah.
They're more likely to babble again because that behavior was reinforced by that positive response.
It's like a feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Their actions lead to consequences, which then influence their future actions.
That makes sense.
Okay, so let's move on to the psychometric approach.
Okay.
This one tries to quantify aspects of development.
Okay, so this is where we start to see tools like intelligence testing and IQ scores.
Right, exactly.
Huh?
But one of the sources also discussed something called the home assessment.
The home assessment.
Yeah, it stands for home observation for measurement of the environment.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because it looks at the home environment and its impact on a child's cognitive development. So it considers factors like how many books are in the home, how much parents engage and play, and how responsive they are to their child's needs.
So it's not just about the child's inherent abilities, but also about the environment they're growing up in.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that the home assessment has been used in over 50 countries.
Wow.
Showing that some factors like parental responsiveness are universally linked to cognitive development.
So regardless of culture, there are some basic elements of a stimulating home environment that seem to benefit children.
Exactly. Now, our sources also talked about early intervention programs.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those.
These programs provide support like early childhood education family services.
Right.
And they've been shown to have these really significant long-term benefits for children.
Especially for those from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Right. It highlights the importance of providing those early opportunities for learning and development.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to Piaget.
Piaget.
Yeah. So Piaget's theory focuses on how infants learn through their senses and actions, particularly during what's called the sensory motor stage.
The sensory motor stage.
Yeah, so this is during the first 2 years of life, and it's all about exploring the world through touch, taste, sight, sound, and movement.
So they're like little scientists.
Yeah, exactly. They're constantly experimenting and learning through trial and error.
I can see that.
Yeah. And some key concepts here are schemes, which are basically mental frameworks for understanding the world,
Okay.
and circular reactions where babies repeat actions that produce interesting results.
Like when they shake a rattle.
Exactly. They accidentally shake it, and then they keep shaking it because they like the sound.
Right.
They're also developing object permanence during this stage.
Object permanence.
Yeah, it's the understanding that objects continue to exist even when they can't see them.
Oh, like peekaboo.
Yeah, exactly. They eventually learn that the person behind the hands hasn't disappeared.
Right.
Then there's representational ability, which is the ability to mentally represent objects and actions.
So they can start to think about things even when they're not directly interacting with them.
Exactly. Piaget divided the sensorimotor stage into 6 substages.
6.
Yeah. But we won't go into detail about each one.
Okay.
But the key takeaway is that this is a period of immense cognitive growth driven by active exploration and interaction with the environment.
It's amazing how much they learn in such a short time.
It really is. Now, it's worth noting that modern research suggests that Piaget might have underestimated infants' abilities in some areas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's where the information processing approach comes in.
The information processing approach.
Yeah, this one views the baby's brain as a bit like a computer.
Interesting.
So instead of focusing on distinct stages, this approach looks at the gradual development of mental processes like attention memory and problem solving.
I see.
And this research has actually challenged some of Piaget's ideas.
Like what?
Well, for example, studies suggest that object permanence and number sense might actually develop earlier than Piaget initially thought. Yeah, in fact, some studies suggest that babies as young as 5 months might be able to do basic math in their heads.
Wow. That's incredible.
I know, it's amazing. It shows they're not just passively soaking up information, but they're actively processing and making sense of it from a very young age.
Right.
This approach also looks at things like visual preference recognition memory.
How babies distinguish familiar sights from new ones.
Exactly, and even cross-modal transfer.
Cross-modal transfer.
Yeah, it's the ability to use information from one sense to guide another.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, like a baby might reach for a toy they've only heard rattling.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, so we've looked at how babies learn through conditioning and how they process information, but what about those physical changes happening in their brains?
Right. What's going on in there?
That's where the cognitive neuroscience approach comes in.
Cognitive neuroscience.
Yeah, it connects brain development to those cognitive advancements we've been talking about.
So it's like peering inside those little heads to see how the wiring changes as they learn and grow.
Exactly. Our sources specifically highlighted 2 types of long-term memory.
2 types.
Yeah, implicit and explicit.
Yeah.
So implicit memory develops early on, and it's all about those unconscious automatic processes like habits and skills.
Like what?
Think about a baby kicking their legs when they see a familiar mobile.
Oh, yeah.
That's implicit memory in action.
So it's like muscle memory, but for the brain.
Exactly. Now, explicit memory, on the other hand, involves conscious recall of facts and events.
Okay.
This type of memory is linked to the emergence of deferred imitation, which is when a baby imitates something they saw earlier.
Oh, like if they see you making a funny face and then try to copy it hours later.
Exactly. That shows their explicit memory is developing.
That's fascinating.
And 2 key brain regions involved in memory development are the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex.
I've heard of those.
Yeah, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for working memory and higher-level thinking, develops a bit more slowly. And it's also particularly sensitive to environmental influences, which really underscores the importance of providing those little ones with a stimulating and supportive environment.
For sure.
Now let's shift gears and look at how social and cultural factors influence development.
Okay.
The social contextual approach emphasizes the role of culture and social interaction in shaping a child's world.
Right.
Vygotsky's sociocultural theory is central to this approach, particularly the concept of guided participation.
Guided participation.
Yeah, it's all about how adults support children's learning by structuring activities and bridging the gap between what a child understands and what an adult understands.
So it's like a partnership.
Exactly, where the adult provides scaffolding to help the child reach new levels of understanding.
That makes sense.
The sources provided a great example of this with a cross-cultural study comparing families from Guatemala, India, Salt Lake City, and Turkey.
Wow.
And it found that how caregivers guided their toddlers' learning varied significantly based on cultural norms. So, for example, in the Guatemalan and Indian families, mothers often provided initial instructions and then allowed their children to learn through observation and practice.
So a more hands-off approach.
Yeah, whereas in the U.S., families, caregivers tended to be more verbally engaged, providing direct instruction and using praise to motivate learning.
So different cultures have different ways of supporting their children's learning.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how these cultural differences play out in the way children learn and interact with their world.
Right.
The social contextual approach has also influenced early childhood education, leading to play-based learning programs based on Vygotsky's ideas.
Oh, cool.
These programs emphasize active engagement and social interaction as key components of learning.
Makes sense.
Speaking of learning, let's look at early language development.
Okay.
From those first cries to babbling and eventually those sweet first words.
Yeah, how does that happen?
Well, it all starts with what's called pre-linguistic speech.
Pre-linguistic speech.
Yeah, those early vocalizations like crying, cooing, and babbling.
Thank you.
And it's amazing how babbling evolves over time.
How so?
Babies start out with those general sounds, but as they're exposed to their native language, their babbling becomes more specific.
Oh, wow.
It's like their little brains are figuring out the sounds of their language.
That's incredible.
And as they progress, babies develop both a receptive
The
vocabulary,
words they understand.
right, and an expressive vocabulary.
The words they can actually say.
Exactly. And of course, their receptive vocabulary is much larger at first.
Right, they understand more than they can express.
But then, somewhere between 16 and 24 months, many babies experience what's called the naming explosion.
The naming explosion.
Yeah, their expressive vocabulary just skyrockets and they start learning new words at an incredible pace.
It's like they suddenly realize that everything has a name.
Exactly. And even before that, they're busy figuring out the sounds of their language, becoming attuned to what are called phones.
Poems.
Yeah, the basic units of sound. And research has shown that this ability to discriminate between sounds in their native language actually predicts later language abilities.
Oh, wow.
So it seems those neural pathways for language are being established right from the very beginning.
That's amazing.
And speaking of the brain, research has also found striking similarities in how infants and adults process language.
Really?
Yeah, suggesting that those neural connections are built early on.
So those tiny babies are already laying the foundation for a lifetime of communication.
Exactly. Now let's explore how babies develop their unique personalities, starting with temperament.
Temperament.
Yeah. It refers to those early biologically based tendencies to respond to the world in certain ways.
So some babies are naturally more easygoing, while others might be more sensitive or slow to warm up to new situations.
Exactly. Researchers have identified 3 main categories of temperament: easy, difficult, and slow to warm up.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that these are broad categories, and not every baby fits neatly into one.
Right. Every baby is unique.
And temperament isn't set in stone. While it has a biological basis, experiences and interactions with caregivers also play a role in shaping it.
I see.
The concept of goodness of fit is important here.
Goodness of fit.
Yeah, it refers to how well a child's temperament matches their environment and the caregiving they receive.
Whoa.
So a child with a more sensitive temperament might thrive in a calm, predictable environment.
Whereas a more outgoing child might do well in a more stimulating setting.
Exactly. And cultural variations can also influence what's considered a difficult temperament.
Oh, how so?
Well, what might be challenging in one culture could be perfectly adaptive in another.
Right. Different cultures have different values and expectations.
Exactly. It reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to understanding temperament.
That's an important point.
Now let's talk about Erikson's stages of psychosocial development.
Okay.
For infants and toddlers, the first 2 stages are particularly relevant: trust versus mistrust, and autonomy versus shame and doubt. So that first stage, trust versus mistrust, revolves around whether babies develop a sense of trust in the world and their caregivers.
So if a baby cries and their caregiver consistently responds with warmth and care, they're more likely to develop a sense of trust.
Exactly. But if their needs are inconsistently met or neglected, they might develop a sense of mistrust.
Which can impact their future relationships and overall well-being.
Right. Then comes the stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt, which kicks in around toddlerhood.
Okay.
This is all about those little ones asserting their independence and testing boundaries.
The terrible twos.
Yeah. They want to do things for themselves, explore their surroundings, make their own choices.
Right.
And it's important for caregivers to support their growing autonomy while providing appropriate limits and guidance.
So if toddlers are constantly restricted or criticized for their attempts at independence, they might develop feelings of shame and doubt.
Exactly, but if they're encouraged to explore and master new skills, they're more likely to develop a sense of confidence and competence. This stage is often associated with the terrible twos, but research shows that this phase isn't universal.
Really?
Yeah, for example, a study comparing Mayan and American families found that Mayan toddlers rarely exhibited the same negativism and defiance often seen in American toddlers.
Interesting. So cultural values and parenting practices can influence the expression of autonomy.
Exactly. Speaking of cultural influences, let's delve into attachment theory, which explores the bond between babies and their caregivers.
Okay.
This theory, developed by John Bowlby, emphasizes the evolutionary roots of attachment and its crucial role in a child's emotional and social development.
I see.
One of the key concepts here is the idea of a secure base.
A secure base.
Yeah, when babies have a secure attachment, they feel safe and confident to explore their world, knowing that their caregiver is there to provide comfort and support when needed.
So like a safe haven.
Exactly. Our sources reference some studies with rhesus monkeys.
And monkeys.
Yeah, that really highlight the importance of contact comfort, that physical closeness and emotional connection.
Interesting.
Those studies showed that baby monkeys preferred to cling to a soft, cuddly surrogate mother, even when it didn't provide food, over a wire mother that did provide food.
Wow. So they were choosing comfort over nourishment.
Exactly. It really demonstrates that feeding isn't the only thing babies need.
Right. They crave that emotional bond and physical touch.
Exactly. And the way those early attachments develop can have a lasting impact on a child's social and emotional well-being.
I can see that.
Researchers have identified different attachment styles, the most common being secure attachment.
Okay.
But there are also patterns of insecure attachment, such as avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized attachment.
And how do they assess these attachment styles?
Well, researchers often use a technique called the strange situation.
A strange situation.
Yeah, it involves observing a baby's reactions to brief separations and reunions with their caregiver in a controlled setting.
I see.
And the patterns they observe provide insights into the quality of the attachment bond.
So the way a baby reacts to those separations and reunions can tell us a lot about their attachment style.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that research shows these early attachment patterns can influence a child's relationships and social skills well into adulthood.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really emphasizes the importance of those early bonds.
For sure. And it's worth mentioning that those early bonds can often be traced back to a parent's own attachment history.
Yeah, the concept of intergenerational transmission of attachment patterns is fascinating.
Right.
Research has found that a parent's own experiences with attachment during childhood can influence how they interact with and respond to their own children.
So it's like a cycle.
Exactly. It really highlights the importance of addressing attachment issues, not just for the well-being of the child, but also for breaking those cycles of insecure attachment that can be passed down through generations.
That's a really important point.
And while we're talking about the lasting impact of those early years, let's shift our focus to the development of self-concept.
Self-concept.
Yeah, that sense of who we are. So from those early moments of recognizing themselves in a mirror to developing a sense of their own abilities and traits, it's an incredible journey of self-discovery.
It really is.
And a lot of it hinges on the development of self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, that realization that they are separate and distinct from others.
Okay.
One of the classic ways to assess this is the rouge test.
The rouge test.
Yeah, where researchers put a dab of rouge on a baby's nose and observe their reaction in front of a mirror.
Oh, interesting.
If they touch their own nose, it indicates that they recognize themselves in the reflection.
That's a clever way to test it.
It is, and this usually happens around 18 to 24 months of age.
Okay.
And around this time, babies also start using first-person pronouns like me and mine, further solidifying their sense of self.
It's like they're announcing to the world, hey, I'm here and I'm a separate person.
Exactly. And as their self-awareness blossoms, so does their desire for autonomy.
Right, they want to do things for themselves.
Exactly. Make their own choices, assert their independence. This often leads to the classic toddler behaviors of testing limits and saying no a lot.
The terrible twos strike again.
Yeah, it's like they're figuring out where their boundaries are and how much control they have over their world.
It's a crucial stage for developing a sense of competence and mastery.
Exactly. And it's also around this time that we see the emergence of social referencing.
Social referencing.
Yeah, it's when babies look to their caregivers for cues on how to react in uncertain situations.
Oh, I see.
They're constantly observing and absorbing information from the adults around them, using those cues to guide their own behavior.
Like they have their own little social compass.
Exactly, helping them navigate the complexities of the social world.
That's fascinating.
And those early interactions with siblings and peers play a huge role in shaping their social development.
For sure.
Sibling relationships in particular can be a real training ground for learning those essential social skills: cooperation, sharing, conflict resolution, negotiation.
It's like a microcosm of the social world.
Exactly, where they learn to navigate those complex dynamics.
Right.
And even those conflicts, as frustrating as they can be for parents, can actually be beneficial for children's development.
Really?
Yeah, it's through those conflicts that they learn to assert themselves and compromise and see things from another person's perspective.
That makes sense.
And those early peer interactions, whether with siblings or other children, lay the foundation for forming friendships and navigating social situations.
Right.
Now let's talk about childcare, which is a significant part of many families' lives.
Yeah, with many families having both parents working childcare arrangements have become increasingly common.
Exactly. And our sources highlighted the importance of quality care, particularly the presence of warm, responsive caregivers and low staff turnover.
Those factors have been consistently linked to positive child outcomes.
Exactly, both in terms of social emotional development and cognitive
It
development.
makes sense when babies and toddlers feel safe, secure, and supported, they're more likely to thrive.
Exactly. But when those elements are lacking, the impact on a child's development can be less positive.
Right.
It highlights the importance of carefully considering childcare arrangements and ensuring that they provide a supportive and nurturing environment that fosters a child's well-being.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance between work and family life and making sure those little ones are getting the care and attention they need to thrive.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, not all children experience those positive, nurturing environments.
Right.
And that brings us to the difficult topic of child maltreatment.
Child maltreatment.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking reality that impacts far too many young children.
It is.
Our sources delved into the various forms of maltreatment, including physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, and emotional maltreatment.
It's hard to even think about.
I know, and it's a tragic fact that infants and toddlers are the most vulnerable age group for maltreatment.
Because they're so dependent on their caregivers.
Exactly. They're completely dependent on their caregivers for their basic needs and protection. And when those needs are unmet or violated, the consequences can be devastating.
Right.
Our sources highlighted some specific forms of maltreatment like non-organic failure to thrive.
Non-organic failure to thrive.
Yeah, where a baby isn't growing and developing as expected due to neglect or lack of emotional responsiveness.
That's so sad.
And there's shaken baby syndrome, a horrific form of abuse where a baby is violently shaken, causing serious brain damage and even death.
It's just awful.
It's a stark reminder of the vulnerability of infants and the devastating consequences of abuse.
Right.
Now, when we look at the factors that contribute to child maltreatment, it's often a complex interplay of individual characteristics, family dynamics, community context, and cultural influences.
It's rarely just one thing.
Exactly. Our sources highlighted what's called the ecological perspective on abuse, which emphasizes the importance of understanding these multiple layers of influence.
I see.
They also noted how cultural factors such as attitudes towards corporal punishment can play a role. It's a stark reminder that child abuse isn't just an individual problem, but a societal problem.
We all have a role to play in preventing it.
Exactly. Now, despite the devastating effects of maltreatment, it's important to acknowledge the resilience of many children who have experienced abuse.
Resilience.
Yeah, our sources highlighted factors that can contribute to resilience, such as a supportive relationship with a caring adult, positive personality traits, and a strong sense of self-worth.
So even in the face of adversity, children can overcome those challenges.
Exactly, and that resilience is often nurtured by those supportive relationships and caring adults who believe in them.
It really highlights the power of human connection.
It does, and it underscores the importance of providing support and resources to those who have experienced maltreatment, fostering their resilience, and helping them to thrive.
Absolutely. We need to create a world where all children feel safe, supported, and loved.
Exactly.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
Into early childhood development, yeah.
It's amazing to think about,
Everything we've already talked about.
yeah, how these little tiny humans,
Grow and develop.
it's such a short amount of time.
I know we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, definitely. Last time we focused on those 6 different approaches.
To understanding cognitive and psychosocial development, right?
From behaviorism to attachment theory.
And we saw how each approach kind of offers these unique and sometimes conflicting
Perspectives, yeah.
on how babies and toddlers learn and grow.
Right.
Now I'm really curious to delve deeper into the process of socialization.
Oh, yeah?
It's fascinating how those little ones, go from being completely dependent
Right.
on their caregivers
Yeah.
to navigating the complexities of the social world.
It's amazing how they learn to interact with others.
It really is. Socialization is a really fascinating process, and it starts from the very beginning.
It does.
And it shapes, their behaviors, values, and understanding of all those unwritten rules
Right.
that kind of govern social interactions.
It's like they're learning the ropes of the social world.
Exactly. So who are the key players in this socialization process?
Well, parents and caregivers play a central role.
Of course.
They're the primary architects of a child's early social environment.
It's like they're building the foundation for how those little ones will interact with the world around them.
Exactly. And it's not just about, explicit teaching or setting rules. A lot of it happens through those everyday interactions.
Right, those subtle cues.
Yeah, the way parents model behaviors.
Exactly.
It's like they're constantly demonstrating what it means to be a member of their family and their culture.
Right. One of the sources highlighted the concept of internalization.
Internalization.
Yeah, it's all about how children gradually adopt those societal standards and make them their own.
Oh, I see.
So those external rules and expectations
Right.
become internalized, guiding their actions and choices even when adults aren't around.
So it becomes part of who they are.
Exactly. And this internalization process is influenced by a child's temperament, their relationship with their caregivers, and cultural norms.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of cultural norms, our sources mention how different cultures have varying approaches to socialization.
That's interesting.
It's like those values shape the very fabric of how children are raised and the kind of adults they're expected to become.
Right, like in some cultures, independence and self-reliance are highly valued,
Right.
while in others, interdependence and group harmony are prioritized.
That's such an important point. It's a reminder that there's no one right way to socialize children.
Right.
It's all about those cultural values and what's considered appropriate within a specific society.
Exactly.
Now, beyond parental influences, siblings also play a big role in shaping a child's social world.
Oh, yeah.
Those early relationships provide a unique training ground for navigating those complex social dynamics.
Right, like learning to share and cooperate.
Exactly. Sibling relationships can be quite a roller coaster, can't they?
They can.
Full of love and affection, but also plenty of rivalry and conflict.
Oh, yeah.
And those conflicts, while sometimes frustrating for parents, can actually be valuable learning experiences.
Yeah. How so?
It's through those squabbles that children learn to negotiate, compromise, stand up for themselves, and see things from another person's perspective.
Oh, I see. It's like a crash course in conflict resolution.
Exactly. Those are skills that will serve them well throughout their lives.
You will?
Research has shown that children with positive sibling relationships tend to have better social skills overall
Okay.
and are more successful in forming friendships outside the family.
That makes sense. They've already had years of practice navigating those close relationships.
Exactly. Now, as toddlers start venturing beyond the family circle, those interactions with other children become increasingly important.
Right. They start making friends.
Exactly. They begin to engage in more cooperative play, learn those unspoken rules of group dynamics, and form those early friendships.
And even at such a young age, we start to see those gender preferences emerge in their choice of playmates.
Oh, yeah.
They might gravitate towards same-gender playmates, often engaging in activities that align with those societal expectations.
Of what's considered appropriate.
Yeah, for boys and girls.
It's fascinating how those social influences start to shape their preferences so early on.
It is.
Now, before we move on, there's one more topic related to socialization that we need to discuss.
Okay.
The impact of parental employment and childcare arrangements on a child's development.
Right, that's a big one.
It's a topic that often generates a lot of discussion, especially with so many families having both parents working.
For sure.
Understandably so. Our sources pointed out that while there's no conclusive evidence that maternal employment has negative effects on children, the quality of childcare is a crucial factor to consider.
So it's not just about whether or not a mother works, but the kind of care the child receives.
Exactly. So if a child is in a high-quality care setting that provides warm, responsive interactions, engaging activities, and consistent caregivers,
Right.
they're more likely to thrive.
That makes sense.
When those elements are present, children can benefit from those early social interactions and learning opportunities.
Right, but when those elements are lacking?
The impact on a child's development can be less positive.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of carefully considering childcare arrangements
For sure.
and ensuring that they provide a supportive and nurturing environment that fosters a child's well-being.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's all about finding that balance between work and family life.
Right.
And making sure those little ones are getting the care and attention they need to thrive.
Exactly. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive.
Into the incredible world of early childhood development.
It's It's amazing how much we've uncovered about those foundational years, you know?
Yeah, all those early experiences, how they shape who we become.
Absolutely. We've explored those 6 different approaches to understanding how babies and toddlers learn and grow, and it's clear that, those early experiences have a profound impact on their development.
Yeah, right from those first reflexes to those first words, from exploring their surroundings to developing their unique personalities. It's just this incredible period of transformation.
And we've talked about behaviorism, cognitive neuroscience, attachment theory, the works. I think one of the key takeaways for me is just how interconnected all of these aspects are.
I agree. Cognitive development, psychosocial development, socialization, they all just influence and shape each other in such a complex and dynamic way.
Yeah, it's like a beautiful tapestry where all the threads are kind of interwoven,
Mm.
creating this really intricate picture of human development.
Now, before we wrap things up completely,
Hmm.
I'd love to pose a question that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So we've explored all these theoretical frameworks, research findings, and insights into the various factors that influence development. But what does it all mean for us, as individuals and as a society?
That's a great question. It's like we've gathered all this knowledge, but now we need to figure out how to apply it in the real world.
Exactly. So here's the question I want to leave our listeners with, given everything we've learned about the factors that impact cognitive and psychosocial development. What steps can individuals or communities take to promote healthy development for all children?
That's such a crucial question. It challenges us to think about how we can use this knowledge to create a more supportive and nurturing world for these little ones.
Yeah, it's about going beyond, just individual parenting practices
Mm.
and considering those broader societal influences, the policies, programs, and environments that really shape a child's world.
Things like access to quality childcare, early intervention programs, supportive community resources for families, those can all make a huge difference.
And it's not just about those formal structures. It's also about fostering a culture of understanding and support for families,
Hmm.
recognizing the challenges they face and creating communities where they feel connected and empowered.
Yeah, like creating a safety net for families so they know they're not alone on this journey.
Right. We've seen the incredible resilience of children, even in the face of adversity.
And that resilience is often nurtured by those supportive relationships and caring adults who believe in them.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I hope our listeners will continue to explore this topic and think critically about how we can use this knowledge to create a world where all children can thrive.
Well said. It's been an amazing journey, and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for diving deep with us. We hope you've gained some valuable insights into the fascinating world of early childhood development.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open to the wonders of those early years.
And remember, those early years really do matter. They lay the foundation for a lifetime of learning, growth, and well-being.